Hello, Joy Horn here with the thought for Tuesday. It's a bit of a tongue twister for me. Just wanted to talk a little bit about safety in birth and how to make birth even safer. Birth isn't inherently dangerous. I'll see if I can find the infographic that I'm thinking of in a while. But birth isn't inherently dangerous. I think you're more likely to be murdered than you are to die in childbirth. So remember that. It's really important. Birth is not inherently dangerous. And we would have died out as a species if it were that dangerous for our babies to be born naturally. And this is a response to the acronym report which came out this week. Now, I'm not saying that everyone should have a natural birth, everyone should have a vaginal birth, everyone should have a home birth, because babies will be lost. You know, hospitals and doctors and surgery can save lives, but they can also damage lives. And it's really important that we look at the risks as well as the benefits in different types of birthing and different types of labour care. So I'm not going to get into all the in and outs of natural birth versus surgical birth or interventions in birth, because it's a huge subject and I won't be able to cover it in the 10 minutes that I'm normally here. So what I am going to talk about is practical ways that people can make birth safer for themselves. And I wrote this in response to a pregnant person asking me about the safety. You know, people are alarmed at this recent report. People don't like to think that hospitals aren't going to give them good care and that their life or their baby's life may be at risk. So what can you do? You know, let's get really practical here. What can you actually do to feel more empowered and to make things safer for yourself and your baby? And I'm not going to advise that everyone goes to hospital and has a surgical birth because we know that surgery, like anything else in life, carries risks as well as benefits. And yes, in some circumstances it may have more risks for the baby, and in some circumstances it may have more risks for the mother. And it doesn't mean that one's more right than the other. And a little bit about me and my history. So I was a midwife when I had my children, and I was going to have a lovely natural home birth, and it was all going to be easy because I'd done all the right things, you see, in pregnancy. I'd read all the right books and I had all my midwifery knowledge, and I did my yoga and I ate well. I did all the things that you should do right. And I was going to have a home birth, and I ended up with a transfer to hospital and an emergency caesarean. That was, in the end, very necessary. And, who knows what caused what, but I was very ill and the medical staff did save my life. They may have led to me needing to be saved, but that's, again, a topic for another day. But I was glad that there was a skilled surgeon when I needed one and that my baby could be born safely. Now, that wasn't my first choice. It wasn't my ideal choice, and when it came to planning my second baby, because I carried so much trauma from my first, I did consider having an elective caesarean, and I would have been granted one, just because I had so much trauma, but I decided to go with a trial of vaginal birth with a very good birth plan, with really early get out clauses. If things don't go well, give me a caesarean. I don't want any intervention in this labour, just give me a caesarean. And as it was, I had a 3-hour labour and the baby just came out and I didn't have any tears and it was all super. So that's my background, that's my foundation. But my blueprint comes from being born in the 60s, when people just got on and had their babies, and the majority of babies were born at home and born safely under the care of midwives. And I know we've come a long way since then, and I know there have been lots more medical advances and things, But it isn't always the case that the more we do to people in pregnancy and birth, the safer it is. It's just not the case. And the absolute opposite can be true if we look at countries like America that have huge intervention rates and really poor outcomes for mothers and babies. So there has to be a balance. You know, we can look at other countries that don't have access to caesareans and good surgeons, and again, mothers and babies' lives are lost. So there has to be a balance here between what happens in our bodies naturally and recognising when help is needed. Anyway, I said I wasn't going to talk much about the report, and there I go. What I'd like to tell you is how to avoid problems and make birth safer for yourself, because that's what you need to know. And as I said, I wrote it as a response to someone who was frightened after reading the report about Telford and wanted to know what they could do, feel a bit more empowered and a bit more reassured that they'll be taken care of in their birth. So I'm going to read my response, which is on my computer, otherwise I might forget something. So, my advice and guidance re the safety of birth remains unchanged. Ah, shocking. I'm not going to change my practice in the light of Ockenden. Well, no, I'm not, because I was a safe practitioner anyway. And, you know, I'm always looking at my practice and refining my practice. And a great quote is, birth is as safe as life gets. Now, what that means is with anything in our lives, there is risk. There is risk when I step out of bed in the morning. I may trip over the rug, hit my head on the radiator, and that would be the end of me. I may slip down the stairs on a discarded toy, and again, that would be the end of me. I think, I'm not going to go into statistics. I will find that infographic, but I'm sure you're much more likely to be murdered than die in childbirth. If nothing else, take that home today, you know, bear that in mind. So my advice to anyone who's pregnant is, and always has been, to know your rights and choices. So I'm continually on these live streams banging on about educating yourself, knowing your rights and choices. If you don't know that you've got rights and choices and you don't know what's being done to you, you know, you are likely to end up traumatised if things are done to you without your truly informed consent. That's the bottom line. So educate yourself, get to classes, read books, read good books. Don't go on the internet and read horror stories. You know, that's not going to help you. Honestly, it's not. Get an experienced doula for support in pregnancy and birth. Get a doula. Doulas have got an awful lot of information. You know, they're not qualified health professionals in the same way that midwives are. Most of them have done a training course. A lot of them have got additional skills in rebozo or herbs or homeopathy or massage, you know, and they're a really good person to remind you about your rights and your choices and, help you stand your ground on things. So do get a doula. Doulas, I think everyone should have a doula, really. But there we are. Avoid unnecessary, which are also called routine interventions. So one size doesn't fit all, particularly in maternity care. If I had preeclampsia, you know, if I was ill and needed my labour inducing, induction of labour would be a really, really good thing. If I'm being offered induction because my baby might be slightly larger than average or slightly smaller than average, or, you know, I'm showing glucose, you know, more than I should do on my glucose test, and, you know, guidelines say I should be induced, isn't always a really good reason for induction. You know, sometimes it is. If I'm diabetic, if I have a macrosomic baby, perhaps I might, you know, opt for induction. Perhaps I won't. You know, perhaps I've had difficulties before with induction and I'll choose a different way this time. It's all about weighing up the risks and benefits for you as an individual and not meekly accepting standardised care that's offered. Ask, what are the benefits? What are the risks? What are the alternatives? Use your instinct and ask, what if I do nothing? What if I don't have this? What will happen? That's what I forgot to put in my original post, the BRAIN acronym, but I've just told you it now. What else can we do to reduce risks? Avoiding unnecessary interventions, which includes considering which birth setting may lead to less interventions and better outcomes. So for a lot of people and women, the safest place for them to give birth will be at home or in a birth centre. It just is. First time mums, maybe it's slightly safer to be near a hospital in case you need help getting your baby out, but you're more likely to need help getting your baby out if you start in hospital. If you start your labour at home and need to transfer to hospital, then you have less interventions and less surgical birth and better outcomes because of that. But there we are. It's all a choice, isn't it? And perhaps there isn't good midwifery support in your area. Perhaps you'd feel more confident in hospital. Perhaps you feel more confident knowing that there are epidurals, or that there's a paediatric unit, or whatever makes you feel safe. So choose your birthplace really, really carefully after doing your homework. Do your research. Going on and on. Oh, I did use the BRAIN acronym. There we are. Demand better. So write to your head of midwifery, write to the hospital's chief executive, write to your MP, and demand more midwives be employed by trusts. Tell them what's wrong in your area, make suggestions on how they can change, encourage all your friends to do likewise. I'm going to sound like a broken record. I've been saying this for years, but I'm going to keep on saying it because there we are. Join AIMS, the Association for Improvement in Maternity Services. Your donations help support others to get good maternity care. AIMS produce lots of good information online. They have a support line for people having problems getting good maternity care. They're all round good guys. Also join the Association of Radical Midwives, because midwives need support, midwives need good education. And you don't have to be a midwife to join that. The last two, share all positive pregnancy and birth information you've gleaned on your journey with others. So this is what I do. This is what my life is. This is what I do for others. I share all the positive ways that you can help others and get a good birth experience. Do that. You can do that. Anyone can do that. Now, this is a really important one. Know that only 9 to 12% of NICE guidelines are based on best evidence, which means a huge majority of the guidelines that we base care upon aren't based on good evidence. Really, take that home, digest that, think about that. This is what we advise people to do. Our advice is based on NICE guidelines, but if only 9 to 12% of them are based on good evidence, we're not really giving you really good informed choice, are we? Something to think about. And I just summed it up by saying I'm such a tender heart that I wouldn't have survived 20 years as a midwife if I thought birth was dangerous. If I thought it was dangerous and, mothers and babies were dying all around me all the time, I'd be terrified. I wouldn't be able to do the job. What happened in Telford is really awful, really tragic. Something really dreadfully wrong was going on at that hospital. Know that it's not a common occurrence. These things don't happen commonly. So I wouldn't have survived 20 years as a midwife if I thought birth was dangerous and that most people need surgical births to save them from this dangerous process. I was a nurse before I was a midwife. I would have stayed as a nurse if I wanted to watch surgery. The majority of births that I attend and have attended do not need surgery to be safe. They just don't. I know that birth with a known and trusted care team and no unnecessary interventions leads to the best outcomes for families. That is my experience over 20 years as a midwife. you have a known and trusted health provider and access to all the additional care. You know, I'm glad we live in the UK. I'm glad we've got surgeons, and I'm really glad that we've got hospitals and, you know, in case we need them. But it isn't always the best place to give birth for everyone. Yeah, I think that's about it for today. I haven't asked if anyone's got any questions because I was on a bit of a rant. Yeah, if you do have questions, you can put them below and I'll answer them. So yeah, hopefully that's food for thought. And thank you for listening. Bye.